In the quiet pre-dawn blackness of November 28, 1944, something immense slipped through the waters off the coast of Japan.
It moved like a phantom, a ghost of impossible scale, displacing over 70,000 tons of the cold Pacific. This was the Shinano, the largest, most powerful aircraft carrier the world had ever seen, and her very existence was a secret.
Whispered only in the highest echelons of the Imperial Japanese Navy. She was a leviathan born of desperation.
A steel fortress believed by her creators to be nearly unsinkable, but beneath the waves, another shadow was moving.
The American submarine USS Archerfish prowled the depths, its crew entirely unaware of the historic prize that had just appeared on their radar.
They only knew that the silhouette was colossal, larger than any warship they had ever tracked.
A duel was about to unfold between the world's biggest carrier and a lone submarine, a battle that should have been a foregone conclusion. How did this top-secret supership, Japan's great hope, end up on the ocean floor during her very first voyage?
The answer is a story of ambition, haste, and a series of fatal miscalculations that began long before she ever touched the sea.
Shinano's story begins not as a carrier, but as a battleship. She was laid down on May 4, 1940.
Destined to be the third sister in the legendary Yamato-class, the most heavily armed and armored battleships ever conceived.
Alongside her siblings, the Yamato and Musashi, she was meant to be the ultimate expression of Japan's naval doctrine.
The fleet centered around big guns that could dominate any adversary in a decisive surface battle, and her hull was a masterpiece of heavy engineering.
With an armored belt over 16 inches thick in places, designed to shrug off naval shells and torpedoes like they were pebbles.
For 2 years, the workers at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal toiled to bring this Goliath to life, forging steel plates so massive they dwarfed the men who handled them.
But then came June of 1942, and the turning point of the Pacific War.
The Battle of Midway. In a single catastrophic battle, Japan lost 4 of its most experienced fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. The loss was devastating. It wasn't just the ships, it was the hundreds of seasoned pilots and aircrew who went down with them.
The age of the battleship was over, and the age of the aircraft carrier had arrived with brutal clarity.
Suddenly, Japan's naval planners faced a new, desperate reality. They didn't need another super battleship.
They needed to reclaim their lost carriers, and they needed to do it now. This is where Shinano's fate took a dramatic turn.
Her partially constructed hull, already a symbol of immense national pride and investment, presented a unique opportunity.
The Imperial Japanese Navy have made a versatile decision. Convert her into an aircraft carrier.
Almost as complex as starting from scratch, they were grafting the heart of a modern airbase onto the bones of a sea dragon.
Built for a different kind of war, the process would take another 2 years, a period plagued by constant material shortages.
And the growing threat of American air raids, which were beginning to reach the Japanese home islands, and the very nature of her original design meant
like the American Essex-class or even Japan's own Shokaku-class carriers. Instead, Japanese designers envisioned something entirely new for her.
A massive, heavily armored support carrier, and she was to be a floating fortress.
A mobile resupply depot that would shadow the main carrier fleet. Her primary mission wouldn't be to lead the charge,
But to sustain it, she would carry reserve aircraft, mountains of fuel, and tons of munitions to replenish other carriers during long,
Grueling battles, she would be the logistical backbone of the fleet, a role that was less glamorous but absolutely essential.
Her unique design reflected this specialized purpose. She had just a single, cavernous hangar deck.
But it was heavily protected, enclosed within the original battleship's armored citadel, and her flight deck, while enormous,
Was slightly shorter than on other large carriers, as her main role was servicing and rearming planes, not launching massive offensive strikes of her own. Still, she was a behemoth, measuring approximately 872 feet in length and displacing nearly 70,000 tons.
When fully loaded, she dwarfed every other carrier of the Second World War to protect this floating island.
She was bristling with defenses, 16 5-inch dual-purpose guns, and over 100 anti-aircraft cannons.
Designed to throw up a wall of steel against any incoming attack, yet for all her size and strength, Shinano was a child of haste. As Japan's fortunes in the war deteriorated, the pressure to finish her became overwhelming. The defeat in the Philippine Sea in mid-1944.
Another disastrous loss for the Navy accelerated her construction timeline. Corners were cut.
Shortages of skilled labor and high-quality steel meant that many systems were incomplete or substituted with lesser materials.
Welding was often shoddy, and many of the internal watertight compartments, so crucial for a warship's survival,
Were not properly sealed or tested, and these small compromises, born of desperation, were weaving a fatal flaw into the very fabric of the ship. And one of the most remarkable aspects of Shinano's story is the veil of secrecy that surrounded her. The secrecy was so successful that for decades, the Allies had no idea she even existed. No official photographs of Shinano were ever released. The only known images from her lifetime are a few clandestine snapshots.
One taken from a Japanese aircraft to inspect her camouflage pattern, and another captured by a high-flying American B-29 bomber.
That happened to pass overhead, its crew, likely unaware of the true significance of the blurry shape below. This secrecy was a strategic necessity.
If the Americans learned of this supercarrier, she would immediately become a priority target.
Japan's high command envisioned her as a trump card, a surprise weapon to be unveiled in the final decisive battle for the homeland.
In essence, she was a mobile base for both defense and suicide attacks, a linchpin for Japan's final stand.
But scholars still debate whether this hybrid design was a stroke of genius or a fatal compromise.
Was she a brilliant adaptation to new realities, or was she a ship that tried to do too much and ended up mastering nothing?
By late 1944, the war was closing in. American B-29s were beginning to bomb the Japanese mainland.
They did so, and the Yokosuka naval arsenal was now within their reach. And the thought of Shinano being destroyed in her dock by a surprise air raid.
The decision was made, she had to be moved. She would undertake a dangerous voyage to the much safer Kure naval base in western Japan.
To complete her fitting out and final sea trials, it was a calculated risk, a dash through waters now heavy.
But in their minds, the risk of staying put was even greater.
If this story resonates with you, feel free to share your thoughts below.
On November 19, 1944, with little fanfare, Shinano was officially commissioned at Yokosuka.
A seasoned and respected naval officer, but as he walked the vast echoing decks of his new ship, a deep sense of unease must have settled upon him.
The carrier was a beehive of frantic activity. Hundreds of civilian yard workers were still crawling over her.
Installing electrical wiring, fitting pipes, and finishing vital system.
He could see that many of her watertight doors, barriers that stopped flooding from spreading,
were critical pumps and damage control equipment were missing. The ship was a giant, but a fragile one.
Captain Abe pleaded with his superiors for more time. He knew, with the instinct of a career seaman, that taking this vessel to sea in its current state it was a gamble of the highest order. He needed weeks, if not months, to conduct proper sea trials, to train his crew. But the Navy High Command was unyielding to the threat of an American air raid on the Yokosuka shipyard.
Loomed too large in their minds.
Shinano, they ordered, must sail for the safety of Kure immediately.
The final days were a blur of chaotic preparation.
the crew of roughly 2,000 sailors. Many of them, as green as the ship itself, worked alongside the civilian technicians.
Into her massive hangar, they loaded not her own air wing, she had none yet, but a deadly cargo of 50 Yokosuka MX. These were essentially human-piloted rocket bombs, desperate weapons for a desperate time. Alongside them were several Shinyu suicide boats.
Small motorboats packed with explosives. For her maiden voyage, the world's greatest aircraft carrier,
a testament to the hurried and ill-fated nature of her one and only mission.
At 6 o'clock on the evening of November 28th, Shinano was declared ready under the cloak of darkness.
She slipped her moorings and glided out of Yokosuka Bay. And there was no ceremony, no cheering crowds.
Just the silent, imposing silhouette of the ship disappearing into the night, flanked by her 3 destroyer escorts.
The Yukikaze, Isokaze, and Hamakaze, once clear of the bay, Captain Arby set a southwesterly course, pushing his ship to a steady 20 knots.
Roughly 23. Ordered as a zigzag heading pattern or against any lurking submarines.
Their eyes scanning the black churning waves. They were in hostile waters, and every man on board knew it.
Silhouetted for a moment against the moonlight, one of the escorts, the Isokaze, immediately peeled away.
Charging toward the contact to attack, but Captain Arbuthnot was wary. American submarines often worked in packs.
And he suspected this might be a decoy, a lure to draw his escorts away while the real threat lined up an attack. He made a fateful decision.
He recalled the destroyer and ordered Shinano to turn away, increasing her speed to try and outrun the submarine.
This remains a point of debate among naval historia. Was Arby's caution prudent, or did he miss a crucial opportunity to eliminate the threat when he had the chance?
For a time, it seemed his gamble might have paid off. The massive carrier surged through the water.
But Shinano's rushed construction was about to betray her. Just before midnight, a bearing in one of her main propeller shafts
began to overheat, a mechanical flaw that would have been caught and fixed during proper sea trials, and she was forced to reduce speed.
Dropping from a brisk 20 knots down to 18. It was a small change, but a critical one. 18 knots was roughly the same top speed as the American submarine that was tenaciously pursuing her.
The USS Archerfish, commanded by Joseph Enright, staying just outside the range of her lookouts, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike.
That moment arrived in the early hours of November 29th, as Shinano executed a wide, pre-planned zigzag maneuver to the south.
She inadvertently turned her massive slab-like side directly toward the lurking submarine.
It was the shot of a lifetime at 3:15 in the morning from a distance of just under a mile, and Commander Enright gave
The Archerfish fired a spread of 6 torpedoes, then immediately dove deep to escape the inevitable counterattack aboard Shinano.
Then a series of 4 colossal explosions ripped through the carrier's starboard side, sending shudders through the entire 872-foot hull.
The torpedoes struck with devastating precision along a single vulnerable line, and the first tore into compartments near the stern, rupturing an empty aviation fuel tank, and the second slammed into the hull further forward,
crumbling bulkheads and flooding one of the main engine rooms, and the third hit a boiler room.
And the fourth struck near an air compressor station, compromising yet another damage control center. In less than 2 minutes.
Critically, all 4 torpedoes had struck along the seam where the ship's original battleship armor belt met the newer lighter armor.
Yet on the bridge, there was no initial sense of panic. And the crew was new, but they had basic training.
Length off a schooner. Confident in their ship's immense size and armored side of protection, believed she could absorb the damage.
Damage control teams scrambled into the darkness below decks to fight the flooding, and counter-flooding was ordered on the port side.
To try and level the ship out, Captain Abe, assessing the initial reports, felt a wave of cautious optimism. There were no major fires. The explosions, while violent, hadn't caused a catastrophic chafe reaction. 15 minutes after the attack, Shinano was listing about 10 degrees to starboard. It was serious, but it didn't seem fatal. Here, Captain Abe made his second critical error of the night, and convinced that the ship was stable, and that the submarine was still a threat.
He ordered Shinano to maintain her speed of 18 knots, and he wanted to get out of the danger zone as quickly as possible.
But plowing ahead through the ocean only forced more water into the gaping holes in her hull. The immense pressure of the sea
Overwhelmed the damaged compartments. The flooding, which might have been contained, instead spread relentlessly.
Abe chose to flee a decision that would seal Shinano's face for a short time after the torpedo impacts.
So the crew below decks might just win their fight. They counter flooded compartments on the port side.
And manned the pumps, managing to briefly hold Shinano's list at around 12 degrees. But the ship's forward momentum was a relentless enemy.
Monday, water surged into the damaged sections with immense force, placing unbearable strain on the bulkheads. And here,
every rivet that hadn't been perfectly sealed, every welded seam that had been rushed by an exhausted worker, now became a time-fatal leak. Up into the style. A slow, unstoppable cascade of failure deep within the ship's guts.
By 5 in the morning, 2 hours after the attack, the situation was becoming critical. Shinano was now listing,
replaced by a grim understanding. The damage was far worse than anyone had imagined.
But it was too late. The list continued to worsen, passing 20 degrees by dawn.
And extinguished her remaining boilers by 7 o'clock. Shinano was dead in the water, all engines silent, drifting helplessly. Her destroyer escorts closed in, doing everything they could to assist. The Hamikaze and Isokaze attempted to pass tow lines, hoping to...
The destroyers, powerful as they were like ants trying to move a mountain. The 70,000-ton carrier...
By 9 in the morning, Shinano lost all electrical power, plunging her vast interior into
The end was now inevitable. It was clear to everyone that nothing could save the ship. Captain Arby finally turned his attention from his vessel. To his men around 10 o'clock, with the list now exceeding a terrifying 30 degrees, he gave the order to prepare to abandon ship. The scene on deck was one of organized chaos. The huge flight deck was now tilted like a sinking ramp.
Crewmen scrambled to deploy life rafts, while others simply prepared to jump into the cold, churning sea.
The escorting destroyers moved in perilously close, their own crews ready to pluck as many men from the water as they could.
Following the solemn, unbroken tradition of the Imperial Japanese Navy, Captain Toshio Arbe chose to remain.
2 of his senior officers made the same choice, staying by his side to the very end. The story of Shinano is a powerful reminder of how quickly fortunes can turn in war. If you're
at 10:57 a.m. on November 29, 1944, just over 7 hours after Archer's sound there came.
The massive carrier capsized completely to starboard, her great red hull rolling up towards the sky before she...
As she went down, a thunderous roar of collapsing steel and imploding compartments, and a final agonizing groan from the dying Leviathan for a few unlucky souls still in the water.
The powerful suction created by her descent dragged them down with her. In a matter of moments, the pride of the Japanese naval.
The human cost was staggering. Of the roughly 2,515 men on board, including the civilian technicians,
including Captain Abe, and just over 1,000 survivors were pulled from the frigid waters by the destroyers.
In a final, telling detail about the obsession with secrecy, these survivors turned to a major naval base.
But the loss of Shinano was to remain a state secret. And meanwhile, the USS Archfish had slipped away. After firing his torpedoes, Commander Enright had taken his submarine deep to evade the depth charges dropped by Shinano's escorts. Listening on their hydrophones, his crew could hear the unmistakable, terrifying sounds of a massive ship breaking up for over 40 minutes.
When they cautiously surfaced at daybreak, the ocean was empty. They knew they had sunk something enormous, but they had no idea what it was.
Because Shinano's existence was unknown to the Allies, U.S. Navy intelligence initially credited the Archerfish with sinking a smaller carrier.
It was only after the war ended that the astonishing truth was revealed. A single American submarine had on its own destroyed the world.
In the end, Shinano's demise was a lesson written in steel and tragedy.
Her crew was inexperienced, and her captain made critical errors in judgment. Was her sinking the result of one single mistake? Or a cascade of them? Historians still debate whether better damage control could have saved her, or if her runs.
She was a ship that embodied both Japan's incredible ambition and its fatal desperation. Conceived as a trump,
she instead became a monument to its unforgiving nature. A ghost ship lost on her very first dawn.